Hey, this is Andrew with UberCrit. This is not a dead channel, it is a dead channel, but here's a review anyways. Enter PK Out of the Shadows, a licensed action-adventure game developed by Ubisoft Montreal and published by Ubisoft. PK was released on October 4th in the EU and released to the NA on November 1st of the same year. PK Out of the Shadows is based on the Italian comic with the similar name called PKNA, which is the acronym for Papernick New Adventures. In English-speaking countries, this is the same line of comics known as the Duck Avenger. I personally find it endearing that Ubisoft decided to keep the Italian source material when it comes to the PK game. To this day, PK is still being supported in different ways, whether that be through new iterations of the comics and English translations of the original series coming out in 2016. PK Out of the Shadows was the first of only 2 games in the PK Duckverse, so how is it? As mentioned earlier, PK Out of the Shadows is an action-adventure game, so as you would expect from a game in this genre, you will be running, jumping, and shooting your way through a fairly wide array of levels. Some levels take place in the desert, some are in a lab. I thought the settings in PK were quite fun, even if there isn't a great explanation on why you're there, but I'll get to that later. During the beginning parts of the game, your actions are fairly limited. You can only run, jump, and shoot. As you progress through the levels though, you'll find new abilities which make PK more interesting to play through. You get these abilities by finding them in levels themselves via pickups. I kinda like this approach, as the game would present you with an obstacle you can't pass, and then give you a new ability to do so. For example, there are bad guys who have shields and your normal shots won't get through them. I should talk about the combat. It's super simple, but still has a charm in its own way. Combat works like this. You aim at a bad guy using the trigger, and you shoot. Then they shoot back, and you strafe back and forth to dodge their shots. Every fight in PK plays out like this. There are also some pickups which you can find which change your shots, but they don't make that big of a difference. I think it's a good thing that PK Out of the Shadows takes right around 3 hours to beat, because by the time the game was over, I was pretty over the combat. Not to say it's inherently bad, it just feels samey. This isn't helped by the fact that there are very few different enemy types in the game. There are essentially 3 and the rest are recolors, that are just powered up versions of the ones previous. There is this little guy, who are sort of the grunts of the game, this big dude who shoots out in a big line, and these things that follow you and explode when you get near them. One of the way PK tries to switch this up a bit is by essentially having time sections within the levels. Every level, there are 6 scientists you need to save, and these sections happen randomly and liven up the game a bit. It throws obstacles in your way that you need to dispose of fast. This adds stakes to the game that otherwise has very little. If you fail, the scientists die from the saw-like contraptions on their head. You don't get to try again either when you fail. When you fail, you fail. Another of these are these glider sections, which are also timed. These are fine, I guess. They feel a little sluggish, and sometimes you clip on stuff I feel like you shouldn't, but I digress. The other big part of PK is of course the platforming, which is overly fine. There isn't that much that sticks out about it. It worked when it needed to. One particular standout within the level design was this section where the walking bombs are above you, and since they follow you every step, you have to guide them away from the holes in the ceilings. The one big thing that really bugged me in my playthrough of PK was the camera. Do you remember when games had a camera that would change angles when you entered a new space? I do. It's bad. That's what PK has a version of. The camera does whatever it wants. The only control you have of it is sometimes when you aim, the camera will shoot back behind you. This isn't always the case though. Most of my deaths in PK were because of the camera just not wanting to work with me. I think this is only punctuated by the fact that PK is a very easy game. Dark Souls, this is not. There were only 2 boss fights in the game, and they are complete pushovers. I do like the scale of the bosses, but that's about it. They play out almost exactly like regular fights do. Just hold the aim button, dodge some stuff being thrown at you, and kill them good. I suppose you would like to know why PK is fighting these dynamic ducks, but before that, just a little interesting tidbit. PK is of course a Disney interactive game, and they've always looked at their characters as actors. This is how in games like Maui Mallard and Cold Shadow, Donald is a ninja, Or in this small indie game Kingdom Hearts, Donald is a blind mage that never heals you. So, it's not a stretch for Donald to be the titular superhero PK. As for the story, it's as basic as could possibly be. Donald's working at a guard in this big building when he falls asleep and gets a call from Daisy and his nephews who are making fun of him for some reason. He wants to be a hero and they don't believe he can. At this moment, a green AI named One somehow hears this and kidnaps Donald, basically forcing him to become a hero because some alien ducks are invading Earth. So naturally, PK is the duck for the job. He gets a snazzy new look and a new voice to go along with the person. I find it hilarious that they attempt to give Donald a new heroic voice, and they went with Rob Paulsen, who is a fantastic voice actor, don't get me wrong, but Carl Wheezer isn't exactly superhero material. I digress. This is where I get into my favorite parts of PK, and that's the overall presentation. Every cutscene in the game is fully voice acted, and there's quite a bit of it. One of my personal favorites was whenever you encounter a new enemy type, as few as there are, you get a quick scan and an explanation of what the enemy is. On top of that, I love how the cutscenes are portrayed. While there aren't very many cutscenes, they are done in a comic book style with different panels showing the actions of the characters. This is an obvious nod to the source material and a great way to explain the simple plot. The game, in my opinion, looks pretty good in general. It's not the best looking game in the world, but it has its cel-shaded look, which has aged pretty well. The colors are vibrant and everything feels as it should. The soundtrack helps flesh out this feeling as well. When doing my research, I found an interview with composer Daniel Masson, and he writes, "I'm a jazz and rock guitar player. At the time, I was listening to jungle, drum and bass, house, and breakbeat music. When I started a project, I never knew what would happen. I like to experiment, and computer programming was so powerful, with unlimited possibilities, even in 1999. With PK, as it was a classic, I also had to put some classical orchestral arrangements to give the music some emphasis. Overall, I had a pretty good time with PK Out of the Shadows. Is it a groundbreaking game? No, not at all. I honestly wouldn't even say it's particularly that good, but PK is a total love letter to the source material and one I feel like you should play if you're a fan of the Build Crusader.